All right, now let's talk about the woman inductee for the Legacy Award. And it's Cora Combs, one of the more recognizable names in the 50s and the 60s, around that era. Was probably one of the final women, at least survivor at that point, of the Billy Wolf troupe, which was around the Billy Wolf, Moolah era. She even had a daughter named Debbie Combs, which that's important because Debbie was also a part of WWF at that time, most notably during the London Blaze era, having matches there, as well as WCW, even towards the Moolah and Sherry era back then. But the reason why that's interesting is because Debbie Combs would face her mother, Cora Combs, while Cora was under a mask as a heel called Lady Satan. And that way, you could have the younger Combs, which would be Debbie, be the young babyface against the grizzled veteran in Lady Satan, who we've never seen before, never seen her face, stuff like that. And that way, she wouldn't outshine her daughter at that point, I mean, obviously she could in the ring, but as far as a heel-face dynamic, you're trying to make the babyface look good in that match, and it's especially the better way to do it. So as far as her titles are concerned, they're interesting. For the NWA United States Women's Championship, and that title was around during the 60s, 70s, up towards the beginning of the 90s. It was retired in '89, so around the turn of the century, it was gone at that time. For a good reason, because at the time, the Fabulous Moolah was the women's champion for the NWA, and she left for WWE at that time, so the United States title basically be where it was, the stepping stone to where if you were the women's U.S. champion, you'd probably face the women's champion at that time, somewhere down the road. But instead, that became the major title until the NWA women's title came back to the NWA. If that is very confusing, but it'll make sense if you look at the title's history at that time. And of course, the women's Severn title, the Florida version, the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2007, and the WWE Hall of Fame in 2018, the Legacy Award. Now we go to a man who is legendary in a global scale. A man that could probably be, in popularity, you could probably go to Ricky Dozan in Japan, Hulk Hogan in the United States, but there is only one El Santo. One of the all-time greats. When you think of Mexican wrestling, you think of El Santo, you think of Mil Mascaras, you think of Rey Mysterio Sr., you think of Blue Demon Jr., even in recent years like El Zorro, La Parca, that, but no one was probably popular as El Santo. Probably one of the biggest names. Not even Mil Mascaras, I believe, was as popular as El Santo. Because, El Santo was the ultimate good guy. And even his son, El Hijo del Santo, or Son of the Saint, as El Santo literally translates to the Saint, would follow in his footsteps, and I think he's still around wrestling, maybe El Hijo del Santo, unless El Hijo is retired. I don't remember exactly. But holy shit, his filmography. Over 30 years of films, to where El Santo was more recognizable because he was in his mask. To the point where even Nacho Libre, if you remember that atrocity of a film, parodied that to where the champion, the wrestler, would be in a golden mask similar to El Santo's, where El Santo was a pure white mask. This was a golden mask to be a heel. I don't really know. I don't remember fucking Nacho Libre. But, the wrestler, obviously, that was facing Nacho was trying to resemble El Santo. Because El Santo wore his mask in those films, as well as in public appearances. Because in Mexico, your mask is everything. You eat in that mask, you shit in that mask, you sleep in that mask, you shower in that mask if it's a public area or it's crowded. Because that is your identity. That is you as a person, as a wrestler, as a character. To the point where he wore it up until a week before he passed away. He showed himself for the first time, said goodbye to his fans. He knew he was passing away, had bad heart conditions at that time. But that was, he never took off that mask before that moment or after that moment. It was even buried in that mask. It was that sacred. But as far as championships are concerned, for CMLL, the Mexican National Light Heavyweight Championship once, the Mexican National Middleweight Championship 4 times, the Mexican National Tag Titles twice with El Real de Alicio Senior, because obviously there's a junior version of that now. The Mexican National Welterweight title, the NWA World Middleweight title, both the tag titles and the welterweight twice. Excuse me. The NWA World Middleweight title once, and the NWA World Welterweight title twice. And I want to just speak on that really quickly, because the NWA also had, I believe, it was the World Light Heavyweight title, which eventually becomes a Junior Heavyweight title. But of course of that, CMLL was a NWA member for a while, and until they just took the titles and just kept them, which is why names like Mystico held those titles eventually, even when we were part of the J Crown at one point. They eventually then became historic versions of those titles, but during El Santos era, those were legitimate NWA titles. I just want to clear that up just so there's no confusion. For the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame class 2014, for the Wrestling Observer newsletter, their Hall of Fame in 1986 for the WWE, the Hall of Fame Legacy Award, and he never lost which is called Lucha de Apuestas, but it's basically mask versus mask. It's a wager match. So, for example, hair versus hair, mask versus mask, mask versus hair, title versus streak, as we saw with Asuka and Charlotte recently. But he never lost the match, because, of course, he never lost his mask, as he should have never done. Another big name, Jim Londos, one of the bigger names in the 1800s, turn of the century there, towards the more of a turn of the century guy. So from the 1800s towards the 1900s, at least it's 1975 at least, one of the bigger names around the world where wrestling was still considered a sport. And for championships, it's incredible. For the California State 11, and keep in mind, a lot of these are from athletic commissions, because athletic commissions, if you saw the news recently, still exist in the world of wrestling, especially in the state of Louisiana, towards WrestleMania week. And we'll get towards that in a little bit, because this will take a little while, because we're almost done. We have a lot more to go through and a lot more names, and it's going to be interesting to see who's next in this.